The Death God's Daily Troubles by MagicalDucky. Chapter 15. You can grow out of hobbies, but terrible fashion sense is for life. Solaria Shopping District. Kyle's point of view. The hustle and bustle of the capital city surrounded me and Arya on this lazy summer morning as we slowly made our way through the streets of the shopping district. It's been a few days since the whole fiasco with the budgeting notebook, and I've already handed the notebook with some perfectly reasonable expenses back to Mari, who seemed to be all the better after that day. The rest of the week passed by peacefully as I went over a few more basic elemental magic circles with the class. Today, though, I'm helping Arya pick up some supplies from the blacksmith. She was dressed casually in a light blue blouse and brown pants, while I was dressed the same way as always. But as we made our way down the street together, I noticed a couple of people glanced over at Arya every now and then, like they had something to say. They all just turned away after staring for a few moments, though, so after thinking about it for a second, I turned to Arya with a confused look on my face. Hey, Arya, now that I think about it, aren't you supposed to be pretty famous? After all, you are a knight's captain. Normally, everyone would either be avoiding us like they did in Delhurst, or swarming you to get an autograph or something. But there's only a few people even noticing your presence. Well, I haven't made much of a public appearance yet. I stay in the barracks all day for work, so the only people who know that I'm the new knight captain are the nobles who were at the ceremony when I was appointed, and the rest of the knights. The public probably only knows bits and pieces of how I look from rumors, and I don't have my uniform on today. So I doubt anyone will recognize me. Anyway, look, we're almost there. The blacksmith is just up ahead. Come on, Kai. Arya gave me a short laugh before she grabbed my hand with a beaming smile on her face and started to pull me along with her to the smithy on the side of the road. A few seconds passed before she stopped under a small signboard hanging from the wooden beam. The ironclad forge was engraved on the signboard, and the front of the building was made of bricks and stone with a large chimney above pouring out smoke. The sounds of metal banging against metal was faintly ringing out from inside as Arya softly let go of my hand and stood there for a moment before opening up the door to barge into the shop. I walked behind her as a blast of heat hit my face while her voice echoed through the room. "Uncle Greyhill, are you here?" "It's me, Arya. I'm here to pick up my order." I stared inside the shop, where I saw several gleaming weapons, ranging from swords and spears to axes and shields, lined up against the walls next to the mannequins with armor on them. A few of the weapons and pieces of armor even gleamed with colorful lusters, indicating that they were made of precious materials like mithril or orichalcum. There was a large, unmanned counter directly across from the entrance, and behind the counter there was an open door to a large forge room with quite a rare sight around these parts standing in it. Inside was a dwarf. He was stereotypically short, only like little over 2/3 my own height, and a ruffled mound of dark orange hair sat on top of his head, which flowed into a large red beard braided into a knot at the bottom that was attached. You see, the Radiant Empire, being situated close to the border of elven forests, has a population mostly made up of humans and a few elves. But since it's not too geographically close to the kingdoms of many of the other races, such as the dwarves or the beastmen, any trade or intersection between them is few and far between. As a result, races besides humans and elves tend to be somewhat rare in the empire. The dwarf seemed to be in the middle of forging something, as he hammered a piece of red-hot metal on top of an anvil. But once he heard Arya's voice, he stopped and looked up at her with a smile, and he called out from the other room, "Oh, it's you, lassie! You're pretty cheery today, aren't you? Anyway, your commission and the rest of your orders are in back. Just park your cartridge outside, and I'll help you load it up." "It's okay, you don't need to help me load it up, and I don't have a carriage anyway." How are you going to haul this all over? There's no way you can move it all by your hand." "That's what he's here for." Arya grinned at the dwarf before stepping aside and pointing to me standing behind her as the dwarf quickly quenched a piece of hot metal he was working on in the water basin next to him before placing it back in the anvil and coming out of the forge room. He stood behind the counter and glanced at me with a confused look on his face before scanning me up and down and turning back to Arya with even more confused looks on his face. You can't be serious, lassie. You've got about 4 full boxes of equipment, including your new blade. You might be able to carry 2, but look at him. He's got no muscle. I doubt he'll even be able to carry 1. Don't worry. If there's anything he's good for, it's carrying stuff. He may not look like it, but I guarantee you he could carry it all if he wanted to. He's a genuine freak of nature. That freak of nature is standing right here. You know that, right? I slouched a bit and turned to the dwarf with a defeated look on my face before letting out a despondent sigh. Arya laughed a bit and turned around to face me before introducing me to the dwarf. Kai, this is my Uncle Greyhill. He was a good friend of my father, and he's been smithing for the House of Israel before I was even born. The dwarf turned to me with a hearty laugh before taking off his gloves and extending his hand towards me for a handshake. Nice to meet you, boy. The name's Bohard Greyhill, but since you're the lassie's friend, you just call me Uncle Greyhill. Nice to meet you too, Uncle Greyhill. I'm Kyle. I reached out with my hand to accept his handshake as we shook firmly for a few moments before he came out from behind the counter. Well, if you're sure you can carry it all, follow me to the back then. I'll at least box everything up for you. Uncle Greyhill led us through another door to the right side of the counter. We entered a hallway which led to a large storeroom behind the store. The sunlight gleaming in through the windows illuminated the dozens of weapons and pieces of armor littered everywhere. Wherever you looked, there was a box of swords or a full set of armor there, and I called out to Uncle Greyhill as he walked down further into the storage room. Now, there's a lot. Did you make everything here? Well, most of these are just failed or unsold products that I've gathered over the years. But yeah, a majority of it was made by me. Anything else is either something that's been pawned off on me or work of my apprentice Lucas. The boy can be a strange one sometimes, but his talent for smithing definitely no joke. Smithing's in my blood, but the boy's not even a dwarf, and he's still 3 times as good as I was at his age. I stared around again, at the piles of metal as Arya's voice sounded out from behind us. Speaking of which, where's Lucas? He wasn't at the counter today. Well, today's been a real slow day, so I was at the forge anyway, so I let the boy take a break. He's probably just out back messing around again. Here, I'll call him over. Uncle Greyhill walked over to the window at the end of the room, opened it up, and stuck his head out before yelling at his apprentice to come. Lucas, where are ya? We have some guests over. Who is it? The voice of a young boy answered Uncle Greyhill's, and a moment later the back door of the storage room burst open to reveal a young boy holding a small hammer. He looked like he was about 14 or 15 years old, with blue eyes and short brown hair. A pair of goggles sat on top of his head, and he was dressed in a brown leather apron with similarly colored leather gloves on his hands. He glanced around the room for a moment before his eyes lit up when he saw Arya. Miss Ariel, welcome back. How are you? I'm fine. How are you, Lucas? I'm doing great. So what are you here for today, Miss Arya? Just say the word and I'll be on it. Lucas ran over with an excited smile on his face as Uncle Greyhill closed the windows and turned to him with a sigh. Boy, stop bothering the lassie. She'll be here to pick up our order. Oh, the order. All right. Well, where did you park your carriage? I'll help you load it right now. She ain't got no carriage, boy. No carriage? How are you going to move all the equipment? You're not going to carry it all the way, are you? Lucas turned to Arya with a puzzled look on his face before Uncle Greyhill came over and pulled him back by the collar and pointed over to me standing by the side. The lassie ain't moving it all by herself. She's got help. Lucas stared at me like he finally noticed I was even there, as I smiled back at him and waved while Arya walked over to by my side and introduced me. Lucas, this is my friend. He's here to help me pick up my order. Hi there. Nice to meet you, Lucas. My name's Kyle, but you can call me Kai. There was a silence for a moment as he glanced back and forth between me and Arya while Uncle Greyhill slowly let go of his collar. Lucas crossed his arms and slowly walked over to me and looked away with his irritated expression before turning to Arya. Look at how slim he is. I bet he couldn't even lift 1 box. If you need someone to help you carry all this, Miss Arya, let a real man help, like me. I don't care if it takes the whole day. I'll get all this stuff wherever you want it. Oi, listen here, you little brat. I come here out of the kindness of my heart to help Arya move all this stuff, and I don't need your condescending attitude along with it. You need to learn to respect your elders more. I turned to Uncle Greyhill with an annoyed expression on my face as we stood there together and watched Lucas fawn over Arya while she tried to no avail to turn down his offer to help. Is he always this rude? Aye, sorry about that. The boy's got a bit of a fancy for the lassie. Every time she comes over, he drops everything he's got in his arms and runs over. The boy's just rude 'cause he wants her attention. He doesn't really mean it, so forgive him for this time, would you? Uncle Greyhill gave me a hearty chuckle as I let out a sigh before repressing my anger. After a moment, it seemed like Arya finally got through to Lucas that she didn't need his help, and Uncle Greyhill walked over to the corner of the room where a few large boxes of assorted blades and armor were sitting on the floor next to a large sheathed greatsword leaning against the wall. There were about a dozen longswords and a few daggers in one of the boxes, and another one had small metal chest plates of some light armor and leg guards in it, whereas the last two had a cover on top. Uncle Greyhill picked up the sheathed greatsword carefully before handing it over to Arya with a smile. "All right, lassie, here is your new blade." Arya walked over before gently picking up the large greatsword, and despite it being such a large blade, there was an air of elegance to it as Arya slowly unsheathed it. The full sword was about the same size as her previous one, and it was a light steel color, which gleamed with a reddish tint, indicating that it was at very least made of an alloy with a large percentage of orchilium, and not completely made of it. The edges of the blade were razor sharp, and it had an inscription, which consisted of Arya's name and the Israel family crest, running along the flat of the blade. The sunlight shining through the window reflected off the blade as Arya held it in her hands and took a few practice swings in the air before turning around to face a grinning Uncle Greyhill. "So, how do you like it, lassie? It's a beauty, ain't it? Your last one was probably one of the best works, so when you told me it broke, my old bones got all fired up again. Boy, and I took a whole month to make this one special, and this time I can definitely tell you that this is my greatest masterpiece. Right now, it might not be too impressive in anything, except how tough and sharp it is, but once you get some enchantments on it, you'll be holding one of the best swords in the Empire." "That's right, Miss Arya. Your new sword is definitely the toughest blade I've ever seen. The entire thing is made completely out of pure orchilium." "Yeah, it's perfect. Thanks, you two. Look, I even engraved the blade with your name and family crest. Here, let me show you." "All right, that's enough, boy. Why don't you come with me and go get the nails so we can close up the rest of these boxes? Let the lassie check out her new blade in peace." Uncle Greyhill grabbed Lucas by the collar again and dragged him off to the front of the shop as I walked over to Arya, who got into a stance and took a few more practice swings before sheathing the sword. "Wait, now, where did you get the money to buy all this orchilium?" "I didn't. The captain of the 12th Squad returned to the capital about 3 months ago, and her cousin is one of the knights in the 7th Squad. So she heard about how my previous sword broke during our fight with the dragon, and gave me a bunch of orchilium to forge a new blade as a late welcome gift." "Who just gives out that much orchilium as a gift?" "Well, she's the head of one of the richest families in the Empire, the House of Leonora. So it was basically a drop in the bucket for her. This isn't even all of it. There was a little bit more left over when the sword was made, so I gave the rest to Uncle Greyhill as payment for forging the new sword. But he told me it was too much, and he threw in all this extra equipment." "Why didn't you tell me? We could have just paid him with money for the new sword and sold the rest of the orchilium to pay the bills. More new equipment is nice, but our primary concern should be putting food on the table." "We're doing just fine, aren't we? It's not like we're in debt or anything." "Just because we're not technically in debt doesn't mean our finances are great. Until recently, we were just barely getting by. We don't even have any savings right now. How are you going to manage your finances if you keep spending everything you get in on stuff like this?" "Well, I don't need to manage my finances, do I? That's what you're here for. I mean, you did it before when we were in Delhurst, so what's the difference now? Besides, it's not like we desperately need money for anything right now. So what's done is done." Arya let out a cheerful laugh and grinned at me as I sighed and facepalmed. Anyway, I thought you got a new sword after you were appointed as a captain, but obviously you didn't, so if you didn't have a sword, what have you been using up until now? Well, I've just been using a practice sword that I borrowed. It's dull on the edges, but it's made out of metal at least. And since all I do is train with the rest of the night squad, it's been enough to get the job done so far. I stared at Arya with a look of disbelief on my face as she told me about how she's been using a practice sword for the past few months with an embarrassed blush. Even if it isn't made of the most high-quality material, I'm sure that it's just a normal steel greatsword from a decent blacksmith shop. Wouldn't it have been better than a practice sword? I could have at least gotten you one of those to use until your new sword was ready. How am I supposed to know you need something if you don't tell me? Well, of course you didn't know. It's not like you're ever asking me about work. You haven't even been to the barracks since that day we moved everything in. Arya looked away from me with a cute pout on her face, and she crossed her arms and hugged her new greatsword while I let out another sigh. All right. I'm sorry for never asking you about work, okay? So before we go back to the barracks, let me just ask you right now, is everything else going fine at the barracks? Let me know if you need something, and we can pick it up on the way there. Nope, we don't really need anything else. Everything besides my equipment has been in top shape. Thanks for finally asking, though, Kai. Arya gave me a satisfied grin as the sound of the door opening behind us caught my attention. I turned around to see Uncle Greyhill walk in holding a couple of large nails and a hammer in his hand, while Lucas followed behind him with some rope. All right, lassie, just give me a minute to nail up these boxes and you'll be good to go. Arya and I stepped aside as Uncle Greyhill walked over and started nailing the boxes shut. A few moments passed as the sounds of Lucas chatting with Arya was drowned out by the banging of the hammer, and I took a closer look around at the various items around the storage room before a hint of red amidst the sea of silver caught my eye. Amongst the dozens of weapons which blended in with the similarly colored armor, there was something that vaguely looked like a long, red piece of cloth lying flat on top of the metal table. I stared at it for a moment with interest before turning to Uncle Greyhill and asking him about it. Hey, what's that sitting on the table over there? Oh, that? It's just one of the boy's strange creations again. He's always making these random knickknacks. A while ago, I gave him a small chunk of leftover Ochelium from the lass's blade to play with for a few days. Later, he made that thing. I put it out in front for a few days after the boy begged me to, but like I told him, no one would buy that piece of junk. I can't even melt it down again because of the way he made it. So now it's just taking up space. I've been meaning to throw it out, but the boy insists on keeping it. Actually, why don't you just ask the boy yourself? Hey, boy, the laddie here is interested in your work. Why don't you show him what you made? Lucas walked over with an annoyed expression on his face before asking me what I was interested in. So what do you want to know about? The tone of his voice irked me a bit, but I took a deep breath and managed to let go as Uncle Greyhill's voice sounded out again. I can't believe it, but the red thing you made caught the laddie's eye. Really? See, Uncle Greyhill, I told you someone would be interested in it. That coat is definitely a masterpiece. Lucas's attitude instantly transformed into excitement as he gave an enthusiastic smile to Uncle Greyhill, as a passionate twinkle appeared in his eye before he turned over to me with newfound friendliness. Kai, right? Follow me. I'll show you what I made. Lucas ran over to the table, as I awkwardly followed behind him to get a closer look at the coat. The coat itself was slightly dark reddish color, with several streaks of straight white running through along the edges, forming a cool design. A small trim of soft white fur lined the collar and bottom edges, while a few black leather belts sticking out at angles around the waist and chest area functioned as a substitute for buttons to hold the coat closed. All right, stop it, Kai. You're better than this. Don't let your inner Chuny take over. I know it looks really cool, but resist your urges. Remember the consequences. You know better than anyone that you definitely can't be seen in public wearing something like this. Not again. And anyway, what would you even do with something like this? You're a professor at the Royal Academy, for God's sake, not a cosplayer. It's still summer, too, so you have absolutely no use for a coat right now. I stood there for a moment, staring at the long coat with a dazed look in my eyes as I mentally shrugged against my inner edgelord before Lucas turned around to me with a beaming grin on his face and a zealous glint in his eyes. So what do you think, Kai? Isn't it super cool? God damn it. I guess this is my limit. I can't hold it anymore. I can't deny my true self. You're right. It's so damn cool. The passionate flames in Lucas's eyes went on full blast as the conclusion of my inner turmoil resulted in my inner edgelord finally awakening again from its long slumber. I know, right? It took me months to draw the blueprints. Just look at the colors and design. The entire thing is made of a special alloy fabric infused with the perfect amount of beryllium to give it the deep red color, and the white outlines are made of cloth mixed with snow iron from the north. The fur lining the edges of this are from frost ferrets, and the belts are even made of dread boar leather. But even though the thing I'm most proud of is the style, the coat isn't just looks either, because of how I made the alloy fabric. The whole thing is tougher than steel armor, while being as flexible as a normal coat. Lucas rambled to me about the different features of the coat and how it was made with a fervent tone as I listened to him intently before Uncle Greyhill walked over to us and sighed. Well, laddie, I don't know how the tacky design hasn't put you off yet. But let me be straight with you. The boy's coat might be tough, but that's because the boy made the metal so dense. The whole thing's practically made of metal. And even though it's stronger than most steel plate armor, it's also about 3 times as heavy, even if you manage to put it on. You'll barely be able to move, and anyway, it's still summer, so you'll probably be roasted to death standing out in the sun with that coat on. There's a reason nobody bought it when I put it on display out front. A coat 3 times as heavy as steel armor. That is probably the single most impractical thing I have ever heard of in my life. I'll take it! I pulled out my wallet as Uncle Greyhill gave me a look of disbelief, and Lucas pumped his fist up in the air with a cheer. I knew someone would want it. Everyone who ignored it before just didn't understand my vision. All right, Kai. You know what? I won't even charge you. You can just have it for free. Really? I can pay, you know. I wouldn't feel right just taking it from you after you worked on it for so long. It's okay. Uncle Greyhill's been trying to throw it out anyway, so I'd rather give it to someone who truly understands and appreciates my work and have it sit in a trash heap somewhere. I'll even adjust it for you, if you need so. So try it on and see if it fits. Just think of it as my gift to a new friend. Well, if you say so, I guess I owe you one then, Lucas. If you ever need anything, you just let me know. I gave a friendly grin and held out my hand as Lucas and I bumped fists before Uncle Greyhill sighed at the both of us. Well, since the boy seems willing to knock yourself out, laddie. But you might need to trim off some of it to make it lighter if you want to use it. I don't think that'll be too bad. Just let me see. I walked over to the front of the table and grabbed the coat by the collar before lifting it up with one hand. It was a little weighty at first, but after adjusting the amount of strength in my arm, I picked up the coat relatively easily and held it in front of me. After staring at it for a moment, I grabbed it with both hands and waved it around a bit to air out the coat before trying it on. The cuffs were a little long, reaching just past my wrists, but it fit me pretty well in terms of length. And after rotating my arms around a bit to see if there was any stiffness near the shoulder area when moving, I turned around to see Uncle Greyhill and Lucas staring at me in astonishment. It fits great. The only problem is the cuffs are a bit long. But that shouldn't be too hard to fix, right? What's wrong? I guess the lassie wasn't kidding when she said that you could carry the whole order if you wanted to. I stared back at them with a slightly confused look on my face as Arya walked over to us from the corner of the room that broke into hysterical laughter once she saw what I was wearing. What the hell are you wearing, Kai? A coat. It's pretty cool, huh? Well, I wouldn't say it's cool. It's definitely something. Oi, what's that supposed to mean? I gave Arya an angry smile as I stood there wearing the coat with my arms crossed. After a moment, Arya's laughter finally started dying down, and she wiped away the tears in her eyes before covering her mouth and letting out a few more giggles. Anyway, I think it's about time we go. I told everyone I would be back at the barracks with our new equipment by noon. Come on, Kai. Let's take that tacky coat off and let's get going. I let out a sigh before taking off the coat and putting it back on the table as Arya turned around and walked back towards the boxes with her order in the corner of the room. A few minutes later, I heard the hustle and bustle of the city envelop me as I stepped out of the door and into the sun with 3 boxes of equipment in my arms. Arya stood next to me with a box in her hands, while her new greatsword hung from her back just like her old one did back when we were adventuring. She said her goodbyes to Uncle Greyhill and Lucas, who were standing there by the entrance of the shop before following me out into the street. All right, see you guys. Aye, come by again soon, lassie. And you too, laddie. Goodbye, Miss Arya. Hope you drop by again. Oh, and Kai, come back in a few days. I'll have the coat ready for you. Thanks, Lucas. I'll see you then. All right, Kai. Go to the barracks. Arya turned to me and gave me a carefree grin before starting to walk towards the 7th Squad barracks while humming a tune as I followed her. Speaking of which, this really will be the first time I've visited the barracks since I helped Arya move in. I don't think I've ever met any of her subordinates either. Yeah, well, it looks like Arya's a lot more cheerful nowadays, and she always seems happy whenever she comes home, so they're probably nice people, right?